Gulko Short Riga 1995. The first look, you might think white will easily get a draw by advancing towards the f6 pawn. But after king e7, a tricky move from black, so he can take a position, white has to move. So he's pushing the pawn, black is pushing, and white goes after the h pawn. Take, and king d5, he can go here or here, won't make any difference for white, because black will get the key squares and win the endgame. In order for white to get a draw, he needs to meet king e6 or king h4 while he still has the pawn on e3. If you remember on the variation we previously calculated, the white pawn was pushed to e4, and that's what brought the defeat up on the white side. Because now if we calculate further, if we advance, he takes, we advance, we get enough to capture the black pawn. Even if he's pushing, we go behind, and black won't be able to take the white pawn. Even if he advances, it will still be a draw. How can white do that? But if the black king, instead of going to e6, will go to g6, going to h4 would be pointless for white. In this case scenario, white has to go to e4 and exchange the e pawn and leave the blank side with a flank pawn. Right? These pair squares we found are not corresponding squares, since no Zuzwang exists. But our calculation allows us now to begin the search and analysis of correspondence. Having in mind the plans we just looked into, we can distinguish the first pair of corresponding squares. If you remember, black king had two plans, stepping on g6 and stepping on e6. Both of them had to be met by white in the proper manner to make a draw. So, as you can see, if black steps on f7, that will allow him access to both of the squares. So then we have the square f7 has to be met by white king from a square where he can have access to f4 and h4, and that will be g3 is the square that allows the king, white king, access to those two squares. So if you remember, on king e6 by black had to be met by king h4 from white, and king g6 by black had to be met by king f4 from white. And if you remember, in our first calculation, when white step on f4, we step on e7 with black. So if white will go to g3, we can meet that with king f7 and take the correspondence. That was the reason why black king moved to e7. Quite complex decision from black. Alright, so if white is to meet now, if to move, and remember he played f4, well, maybe white can play f2 in this case. Is that the correct winning move, or maybe not? If he does that, let's say black will step on e7. Can white position himself in a square that will allow him correspondence for those two? No, unfortunately, he will lose the game. So that king f2 will be wrong for white. The best move for white will be king to g2, and as soon as black is stepping in this space, white can go to h3, and if black decides to maneuver on these correspondence squares, white can step on, sorry, it was h3, now it's a3, and if he decides to step on f7, we take g3. And now the solution. White goes to g2, king to g8, king to f2. White can afford himself the luxury of repeating the moves because the draw is his goal. King to f8, king to g2 again, and now king to e7. Corresponding will be king to h3, king to f7, king to g3, king to g6, king to f4, king to h7, king to f5, king to g7, e4, king to h6, and after we take and black pushes h4, draw cannot be avoided.